In the windswept expanse of Iceland, a discovery has sent ripples through the world of modern architecture. It's not a high-tech skyscraper or a futuristic smart home. It's a house buried for centuries, built 1,000 years ago by Vikings. And what archaeologists are learning from its miraculously preserved walls reveals a fascinating truth. This primitive Viking longhouse was built on principles of energy efficiency that challenge how we think about comfort, and it holds secrets for the sustainable homes of our future. When we picture the Vikings, we see fierce warriors and master seafarers. We think of long ships and a culture defined by expansion. But what about when they went home? How did they survive in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth? For the Norse who settled Iceland, the problem was immediate. They had arrived in a land of fire and ice, a place with brutal winters and relentless gale-force winds. Worse yet, it was a landscape largely barren of its most crucial building resource: large timber. The sparse birch forests couldn't supply the endless logs needed for the classic wooden halls of their Scandinavian homeland. How do you build a home that can withstand sub-zero blizzards when you have no forest? How do you keep a family warm through the long polar night without an infinite supply of firewood? The common assumption is that they must have lived in dark, crude, smoky huts, barely clinging to life. It's a vision of primitive survival. But that's not the whole story. It dramatically underestimates the ingenuity of Viking builders. They didn't just survive the Icelandic winter. They engineered a solution to it. A solution so effective and so perfectly adapted to its environment that we are only now, 1,000 years later, beginning to truly appreciate its genius. The answer wasn't to fight the landscape, but to merge with it, creating a structure that was less a building and more a part of the earth itself. Forget the image of a simple wooden hut. A Viking longhouse in Iceland was a seriously smart design for a tough climate. Its design was a masterclass in using local, seemingly poor materials to achieve remarkable performance. It all started with the walls. Instead of wood, the Vikings built with the very ground beneath their feet: turf. They would cut dense blocks of peat and sod, rich with soil and grass roots, and stack them in intricate patterns, often in a herringbone layout. These walls weren't just thick, they were colossal, sometimes over 1 meter or 3 feet thick. This wasn't just for show. The countless tiny air pockets trapped within the dense root systems created a wall with incredible insulation properties. It acted like a giant thermal blanket, slowly absorbing warmth from inside the house and, most importantly, preventing it from escaping, while its sheer mass blunted the force of the wind. The roof was just as ingenious. A framework of scarce timber or driftwood would be covered by a waterproof layer, often made from birch bark. On top of that went multiple layers of turf, just like the walls. Over time, grass would grow on the roof, its roots knitting the structure together and turning the entire house into a seamless part of the landscape. This living roof provided even more insulation, and in the winter, it served another purpose. Snow would accumulate on the long sloping roof, adding yet another perfect layer of natural insulation against the biting cold. Inside, the design was just as deliberate. The central feature was the langoldur, or long fire, a hearth that could stretch for meters down the center of the main hall. But there was no chimney, as we know it. While this was due to the technology of the time, the Vikings' solution was clever. They used small controllable smoke vents in the roof, sometimes called wind eyes. The smoke would rise and exit, while the majority of the precious warm air was trapped below. And they had one final brilliant source of passive heating: their animals. Livestock like cows and sheep were often housed in a partitioned section under the same roof. A single cow can generate a significant amount of body heat, like a small space heater. And in the dead of winter, this constant, living furnace contributed vital warmth to the entire structure. People and animals shared a single, symbiotic thermal system. This wasn't just a primitive arrangement. It was a practical and highly effective solution. For a long time, much of this was theory, pieced together from sagas and fragmented ruins. But in 1939, archaeologists in the Þjórsárvallur Valley of Iceland uncovered an incredible time capsule. Buried under layers of volcanic ash, they found the exceptionally well-preserved ruins of a farmstead known as Stöng. In the year 1104, the nearby volcano Hekla erupted, blanketing the valley and burying the farm. The event earned Stöng the nickname, the Pompeii of Iceland. And while the preservation wasn't a perfect freeze frame like the real Pompeii, the ash layer protected the farm's foundations, allowing archaeologists a rare glimpse into the layout of a real Viking Age manor. They could see the outlines of the central hall, the pantry, sleeping areas, and even the lavatory. Stöng made the engineering principles tangible. Researchers could see the sheer thickness of the walls and the intelligent layout designed to conserve heat. The discovery confirmed that these weren't just simple shelters. They were large, organized homesteads, built with a deep, practical understanding of how to work with their environment. Seeing Stöng, preserved in ash, proved that the sophisticated longhouse wasn't a myth. It was the standard for those who planned to thrive, not just survive in Iceland. So, how do the principles of this 1,000-year-old design stack up against modern houses? The answer is both humbling and fascinating. Let's consider a typical, poorly insulated home from the mid to late 20th century. A house with thin walls, drafty single-pane windows, and a complete reliance on a furnace burning fossil fuels to stay warm. That furnace is fighting a constant, losing battle against a leaky, inefficient building. Heat pours out, wasting energy and money. Now, compare the principles of that house to the Viking longhouse. The longhouse was a system designed from the ground up for maximum heat retention. It had a super-insulated envelope, used thermal mass to store and radiate heat, and minimized heat loss through few small openings. And here is the most stunning part. These ancient ideas are the very same concepts that guide one of the most advanced, energy-efficient building standards in the world today, the passive house, or passive house standard. Passive house design is built on core concepts like super insulation, an airtight building envelope, and using passive heat sources. The goal is to create a building that requires radically less energy for heating and cooling. The Vikings, using turf and stone, were accidental pioneers of the same ideas. Their thick turf walls were a form of super insulation. Their meticulous construction was a low-tech pursuit of airtightness. Their limited openings served the same function as high-performance windows, preventing heat loss. And their entire design was a brilliant strategy for capturing and recycling passive heat from the fire, the sun, and even the bodies of people and animals. Of course, the Vikings didn't have triple-glazed windows or mechanical heat recovery ventilators. But the humiliation is this. For much of the 20th century, in the race to build quickly and cheaply, we built homes that were, in principle, less in tune with basic physics than a 1,000-year-old Viking farm. We forgot the fundamental lessons about insulation and heat retention that they had mastered. Now, as we face energy crises and climate change, we're getting back to basics and relearning the wisdom the Vikings put into practice every day. It's incredible to think that these ancient principles are helping to shape our future. What other ancient technologies do you think we've underestimated? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're fascinated by the lost knowledge of the past and the engineering secrets hidden in history, make sure to subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss our next investigation. The Viking longhouse wasn't primitive. It was the product of a smart and resilient culture that knew how to listen to the land. Faced with material scarcity, and a brutal climate, the Vikings didn't see an obstacle. They saw a solution. They used the earth itself as their primary building material, creating homes that were warm, resilient, and perfectly adapted to their world. They demonstrate a profound truth. The most advanced technology isn't always the newest or most complex. Sometimes it's the one that displays the deepest understanding of its environment. The longhouse was a fusion of architecture and ecology, a building that didn't fight the cold but cooperated with it. As we strive to build a more sustainable future, we might find that some of the best ideas aren't waiting to be invented. They're simply waiting to be rediscovered, buried not in volcanic ash, but in our own assumptions about the past.